Good morning. Welcome to morning meditation. It's Wednesday, June 1st. First day of June. Again, not coming from Newman this morning, but hopefully everything's coming through well. Today we get some optional readings for the memorial for St. Justin. And the first reading comes from right at the beginning of 1 Corinthians and gives us a really fascinating reflection, really fascinating passage to think about today. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. Really the first words that St. Paul says after he greets the people of Corinth. And we're just going to jump right into that today as we reflect together. Again, this is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 18 to 25. Brothers and sisters, the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the learning of the learned I will set aside. Where is the wise one? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made the wisdom of the world foolish? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not come to know God through wisdom, it was the will of God through the foolishness of the proclamation to save those who have faith. For Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, Jews and Gentiles alike, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. We get these words from St. Paul right after he tells the people of Corinth that he did not come to preach with eloquent wisdom. And then I think gives maybe one of his most eloquent passages about the cross and about the work of God. And it can be a little hard to kind of parse through because, of course, sometimes Paul likes to go on these tangents. So what is he saying? What is St. Paul saying today at the beginning of 1 Corinthians? And I want us to start just thinking about that first sentence. The message of the cross is foolishness. The message of the cross is foolishness. Of course, in our day now, it's not a surprise, of course, to realize that, the act of the crucifixion of Jesus did not initially come as a triumph. Of course, that's not something that's new to us, but sometimes we can get maybe, of course, so fixated on the amazingness and the beauty of the resurrection that we forget what that crucifixion meant. Right, that humiliation that the act of a Roman crucifixion was. And we see here, halfway through what Paul is writing, this idea that we proclaim Christ crucified, but this is a stumbling block to the Jews. The Jews, of course, who are looking for this victorious Messiah to come in, to purge Israel of the Romans, but instead the Romans kind of win the day, right? So it's a stumbling block to the Jews. And then to the Gentiles, right, it's just foolishness. This idea, again, that you're proclaiming a God who was killed by humanity. How foolish. So all throughout this, Paul is, instead of arguing with, instead of trying to correct and say, no, it's not foolish in this way, he accepts it. No, our faith is based a little bit on this foolish idea that someone would sacrifice themselves, that someone would give themselves that someone would lose in a human way instead of this great victory. And as we've maybe come another 2,000 years since this, we have, of course, been blessed with many great philosophers, many great thinkers as our saints and as our faithful thinkers. And Paul, of course, is not discounting the words of St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Scholastica or any of these great religious thinkers who have come to say that we can logically and rationally come to understand God. But he's reminding us today, in maybe a not so gentle way, that we might not be able to ever fully understand what God is doing. That all of our greatest human wisdom, all of our greatest human thinking, even our greatest theological thinking of our greatest theologians, will never fully come to understand God. And of course, our church proclaims this in some of our documents. Our church says that we will never, although we believe that we have this fullness of the understanding of what God wants, what that doesn't actually mean is that we have the complete understanding. And St. Paul reminds us to maybe step back a bit from this surety that I know what God is doing. I know how God wants me to think in this way, or how God wants the church to think in this way, but to step back, to allow the mystery of God to become real, allow us to not be so sure, but instead to trust. To trust in God, to trust in that foolish message. And then again, in that, there's a call then to also be like Christ in this foolishness. In this world today that is so polarized, that is so about right and wrong, we can find ourselves, even with faith, being so convinced that we always need to be sure of ourselves. If we're going to talk about God, or if we're going to be a Christian, we have to be so sure, we have to be so strong. But what St. Paul's calling us to today is a little bit of humility, to be foolish. That if we truly desire to be like Christ, that sometimes we will look like fools. And that can mean foolishness in even the simplest ways. I was talking about this passage with some of our youth group kids a couple years ago when I'm at a different parish. And I was talking about the idea that even in the sense of just very simple, that you might hold the door open for someone who is so far away that you look like a fool, just standing there and opening the door for them. But why not? But if we truly believe that Christ is calling us to see the great dignity and the great importance in everyone, why wouldn't we all the time engage in these foolish acts of kindness for one another? That we would say, I don't care that I'm going to look like a dork in doing this really simple thing. Why wouldn't I for someone? Why wouldn't I just try to show very simply that love of Christ to this person walking down the street with me? Because if we build up our foundation of how we engage with people in that very simple way, on that simple level, not so worried to look like fools just to see someone's dignity, then in these bigger ways, in these bigger questions of someone's dignity, of someone's worth, in all these social issues of today, as we have these conversations, we would be so much better informed to see that every person is a beloved child of God, even those that we so strongly disagree with, because we've begun to live in a way that even in the most simple way, we are making ourselves fools for Christ. We aren't so worried about being right or living in the correct way, living in a way that shows that, no, we've got it. We understand. We know what's right and wrong. But instead, we're living in this way that says, you know what? I might look like a complete fool, but I'm going to show that person that I care about them. And how much better the world would be if we all better embraced that foolishness of the cross that St. Paul reminds us of. To step back from needing to know what's right, from needing to know and show that we understand, but to more readily admit that maybe we don't. Maybe today we are a bit unsure. But what we do know is that Christ calls us to love one another, and that sometimes that genuine love is going to make us look like fools. But if Christ could look like a fool in giving the greatest sacrifice, then we can look a bit foolish just in our day-to-day interactions with our brothers and sisters. So this week, as we go about our days, may we think about what are those ways that we can show someone the genuine love of Christ, even if we look incredibly foolish doing it. And may Christ give us the strength to be that fool for him, and to not be so worried about being right or having that full understanding, but being ready to be a fool for Christ. So thank you for joining us this morning as we reflect on being fools for Christ. Again, this was 1 Corinthians, today's optional reading, 1 Corinthians 1:18 through 25. We do this most weekdays, Tuesday through Friday, around 9 a.m. It'll be Father Joe, I think, tomorrow. So thank you for joining us. Have a great start to your June.